come to you from Spanish Town Square, an area threaded with fabrics from our history. Boasting a legacy as the first capital of our island, Spanish Town still possesses many memories of the past. Memories that will surely last, having stood the test of time. Jamaica, wagwan! It's Emancipation Day. We're in the square acclaimed to be the most striking of its kind in the West. Hi, I'm Sandra Clark. Today's show has messages from our leaders. We'll also be walking down a bit further to one of the oldest churches on the island. Join the Jubilee as we bring you gifts from our ancestors. Do stay with us. Prime Minister Andrew Holness joins us with his Emancipation Day message.
My fellow Jamaicans, each year the Emancipation celebrations give us an opportunity to reflect on the struggle of our ancestors for freedom against a system that denied them their dignity and humanity, often through brutally oppressive and violent means. It must have been a euphoric day, today the 1st of August, 180 years ago, when our forebears gathered in their villages and churches to rejoice and give thanks. Free! Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. I can only imagine the tears of joy that would have rolled down the cheeks of our oppressed forefathers, replacing the tears that came from the whips on their backs. They must have celebrated this day as the beginning of a new life for them and for us, their generations to come. It must have been a time of great hope and optimism, a wide embrace of freedom, and a determined rejection of the system of violence used to oppress them. Freedom was a gradual process of securing rights. On that fateful Friday morning, the first day in August 1838, our forebears assumed the full right to work for their own account and enjoy the benefits therefrom. Their children could no longer be taken at the master's pleasure. They no longer faced the threat of the pain of the whip or the ultimate enforcement of death. They could settle lands and live in peace in their villages. The system that classified them as property and denied them personhood and agency came to an end. The immoral system that gave legal authority to enslavers to use violence, including the deprivation of life, to force and subjugate our ancestors to submit, came to an end. In setting aside today, we stand as our ancestors stood, looking back at the brutality and violence meted out to us and rejecting it, and looking forward to the boundless opportunities of our freedom, determined to realize them. The passage of time can erase the profundity of our historic experience, leading us to take for granted or even forgetting our connections to the past. The danger of forgetfulness is to repeat the danger we forgot. Isn't it ironic that as a people who suffered under systematic violence and brutality inflicted by enslavers, we are now inflicting violence on ourselves and depriving our own people of freedom? I'm certain that Sam Sharp would be very disappointed at how pervasive and acceptable violence has become in society and culture. Indeed, violence is systematic in our social transactions. In how we discipline our children, we beat them to teach right from wrong. But in doing so, we teach them that the only way to correct a wrong is through the application of pain, violence. In our intimate partner relations, violence, spousal battering, often by men, and oftentimes leading to the murder of entire families. In domestic matters, family members escalating simple disputes to the loss of life. In our community interactions, the proverbial stepping on the toe in the dance, leading to harm and even death, creating an unending cycle of retaliation. In our music and cultural expressions that claim only to reflect, but end up projecting and promoting violence. However, what would be incomprehensible to Sam Sharp would be the organized violence of gangs and dons against their own people. Yes, the new oppressors, denying our people their freedom. The new slavery masters who use the gun instead of the whip to extort hard-working Jamaicans of their earnings, to demand daughters as tributes from their mothers and recruit our sons into the murderous gangs, to drive fear into entire communities through the threat of pain and the enforcement of death. Today, inasmuch as we celebrate the beginning of our freedom from enslavement, we are also celebrating the end of the violent system that oppressed our forefathers. We must never forget that. Not as motivation to hate, but as a reminder to love and respect ourselves. You know, the enslavers dehumanized our forefathers as chattel, property, not entitled to love or dignity or the inviolability of their physical being, in order to justify the use of violence on them. Unfortunately, we are seeing an emerging culture that dehumanizes and objectify our people and devalue their life. There's a growing lack of respect for the inviolability and sanctity of the physical human form and the right to life. This creates a permissible attitude to wantonly use violence against each other in our society. The violence inflicted on us as a people in our history should not be allowed to imprint itself in a patterned behavior of self-hate. It was the recognition of our humanity, our equality, our dignity and love for our people that led forefathers like Sam Sharp to resist the system of enslavement. The emancipation that resulted was not merely that we are free to do as we wish. Our freedom must evolve to a deeper understanding and respect for rights and responsibility, both for ourselves and others. Today, as we examine our past, let us take lessons from it to address the epidemic of violence that faces us. Today, let us commit to emancipate our communities from the criminal gangs and dons that take away the freedom of our people and have them cowering under their beds in fear. Free yourself of the notion that the violent criminal gangs cannot be brought to an end. Resist them by using the trustworthy channels to provide information to the authorities. Your government is working assiduously to erode the criminal gangs and dons, and with your help, we will bring their tyranny to an end. Today, we must commit to teaching our children to respect life and the inviolability of the person. Physical pain does not have to be inflicted to get compliance, and brutality never rights a wrong. Today, let us dismiss this foolish notion that violence is a demonstration of love. Today, let us commit to being kinder, gentler, more patient, and more civil with each other. Today, let us emancipate ourselves from violence.
Hi, this is Tessan, and I want all you young people to listen to me very carefully. Crime doesn't pay. You can do so much with your life. Don't throw it away in some gang. Stay in school and work hard for what it is you want. It's up to you. Your future will be determined by the decisions you make. Remember, a gang is a dead end.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
The opposition leader, Dr. Peter Phillips, also has some words of wisdom as we reflect on the emancipation experience. His message is next.
My fellow Jamaicans, I greet you in the spirit of freedom that is the essence of emancipation. Emancipation Day is a timely reminder that our freedom from plantation slavery was the outcome of selfless, courageous actions by Jamaicans who struggled for centuries to break the chains of their enslavement. The ending of the evils of human enslavement, however, only marked the beginning of a new struggle to secure the political and economic empowerment of the hundreds of thousands of Jamaicans who had suffered and languished during slavery. In the circumstances of British colonialism of those times, improvement was slow in coming. Indeed, it was not until the 1938 Workers' Rebellion, which led to the formation of modern political parties and trade unions, as well as to the achievement of universal adult suffrage, that Jamaica was definitively launched on a path of progress. Over the years, this progress resulted in self-government and independence, and in the steady improvement of social conditions. Even so, victory is not complete. In many ways, we still see around us evidence of the mental slavery that Marcus Garvey spoke about and which Bob Marley later identified powerfully through his music. We see mental slavery in our people when some continue to bleach their skin and reject the God-given beauty that nature has provided for them. We see it in the many attitudes towards family life and parenting, which still leave too many of our children abandoned in the streets in the face of absent parents. So, even as we celebrate the achievements of generations past who broke the shackles of slavery, let us also draw from their experiences the inspiration that we need to complete the mission. Let us also remind ourselves of the lessons that we have learned in the course of our struggles as a people. Emancipation allowed us to refashion our social, cultural, and political arrangements, and to understand the essential truth that nationhood must be based on fundamental principles of universal freedom, human dignity, and equal rights and justice for all people. There is a second major lesson to be learned from the successes that we achieved in destroying the evil system of slavery, and that is the value of collective responsibility and collective action. It was the collective action of the supporters of Sam Sharp and the solidarity of each of the enslaved persons with the other that enabled them to mobilize and strike down the brutal system of slavery. In the face of the challenge that the country faces today to maintain the moral foundations of our nationhood and the standards of integrity needed in national leadership, we must remember that the gains made in the past were made by virtue of the collective action of our people in their trade unions, in their community organizations and civic associations, and in their political parties. We will need the same level of cooperation to sustain our efforts to build upon the foundations of our emancipation and to provide every Jamaican with the opportunity, food, shelter, security, health care and education, and all the benefits of modern life. My fellow Jamaicans, I hope we all take a moment on this Emancipation Day to reflect on the true significance of this anniversary. This is even more important as we are witnessing across the globe a resurgence of ugly doctrines of racism and oppressive political ideologies that are again presenting themselves. This should be a reminder that the cost of our freedom is our eternal vigilance and our willingness always to protect the gains that have been won by the blood, sweat, and sacrifice of our ancestors. Let us recommit on this day to fulfill the mission of our ancestors by expressing solidarity with each other and by living in peace and harmony with our neighbor, so that Jamaica will ultimately be the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I wish for you all a restful, happy, and safe Emancipation Day. May God continue to bless you and to bless our country, Jamaica, land we love.
Walls of bricks, stones with stories of olden days to tell. The Philippo Baptist Church stands with 200 years of rich history. Come, let's visit this historic establishment that is still a place of solace and worship for over 1,000 members.
It was our own national hero, the Right Excellent Sam Sharp, an enslaved man and a freedom fighter who said, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery." That sentiment was also shared by many other slaves. But the fight for freedom and the hope for victory brought liberation to many. Right here in Jamaica, the movement to end slavery was very active, and landmarks across the island document this part of our history.
We are on the Emancipation Trail, and we're looking at the symbolic parts of Jamaica which relate to emancipation, a very important change of status in our country. We're here in the Philippo Baptist Church compound in Spanish Town. Spanish Town is a very old city, founded in 1539, I believe, and this particular site was where the Baptists created a congregation in 1818. And this church, built by the Baptists at the time of Reverend Philippo, was part of the congregation that was very supportive of the move to emancipate all enslavement. And that is a magnificent building going back probably close to 200 years. This church is very historic. Right here, under this tamarind tree, and identified by this plaque, is the slave chains which were buried on August the 1st, 1838. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Deacon Ivan O'Connor, a member of this congregation, who is going to tell us some more about this very historic site and its relationship to emancipation.
I understand that part of the Declaration of Emancipation was read from the steps of this church. And a deep hole was dug right here, and all the chains that were available were put in there and covered. And a tamarind tree was put there as a monument. I understand that the first tamarind tree was destroyed by the 51 hurricane, but it was replaced. And it stands here now as a monument where people can come and get tamarind and remember the slavery chains.
And touch the monument,
right,
as part of our experience,
right, it is here
of
as a
what
reminder.
Emancipation was all about.
Right.
But I also think we have to remind ourselves that the original official declaration was read from the steps of King's House,
That's
the facade which is still in front of the square.
That square is Emancipation Square, which is also in Spanish Town and just a few meters away from the Philippo Baptist Church. Here was once the town center. Other important buildings in the square include the old House of Assembly, Rodney's Memorial, and the old courthouse. The area was severely damaged by fire as well as the 1692 earthquake, but parts of the buildings have since been restored and put to use. Back over at the Philippo Baptist Church,
We want to reaffirm how important the Baptist movement and denomination was to emancipation. They were major players in persuading the English government to declare free at last, emancipation on the 1st of August, 1838.
And it is believed that the chains of slaves were buried at the Philippo Baptist Church due to its close proximity to Emancipation Square and the unrelenting movement by the Baptist Church to put an end to slavery.
Somebody said some time ago, how can we write the history of Jamaica without including the Baptists? The Baptists were one of the churches that were very integral to the teaching of the slaves and emancipation. James Philippo was one of the persons who was integral in getting emancipation for the slaves in Jamaica.
While emancipation was declared for slaves, their conditions were not improved. So the movement for a more just society was challenged by Paul Bogle and George William Gordon. They were also part of the Baptist movement and later became two of our national heroes. As a result of this involvement, Baptist work in Jamaica became an enduring symbol of the church's opposition to slavery and all other forms of injustice.
This building was put up sometime about 1827 thereabout and has been maintained over time. It's a natural heritage site, and so the National Heritage Trust has control over what happens here. Right after emancipation, James Philippo established free villages like in Sligoville, in parts of Clarendon, and also established churches. So this church is steeped in our history in Jamaica.
Many communities in Jamaica have roots that run deep and reflect the changing tides of history. Right from the comfort of your home, we're taking you on a journey across the island. Let's explore the history behind some of our communities.
The story begins here at our first stop, Sligoville, St. Catherine.
Welcome to Sligoville. It's the first free village to be established in Jamaica by yours truly, Reverend James Philippo. I was an English Baptist minister. The area provided a haven for ex-slaves, as many of them did not own land. Sligoville was, however, named after the second Marquis Sligo, who was governor of Jamaica in 1834.
Sligoville has not forgotten its roots. A tradition which originated then is still practiced today. It usually begins with gospel singing and the reading of the Proclamation of Independence.
After that, we had the lighting of the bonfire, and then we had continued with the gospel singing. We usually celebrate the emancipation, a special day.
Today, Sligoville is a quiet little town in the hills of St. Catherine.
The positive thing about Sligoville is that people love the area because of its quietness. The weather, as you're enjoying climate, it's peaceful.
August Town, according to the Dictionary of Jamaican Place Names, was given its name to commemorate emancipation being declared in the month of August. Makes sense, don't it? The community became popular with the help of a prophet, Alexander Bedward.
I developed a religion called Bedwardism. I had thousands of followers, but everybody lost faith in me when I believed I could fly. But guess what? My healing powers did not go unnoticed.
Oh, dip them, Bedward, dip them in a healing stream.
Bedwardism remains somewhat active in Augustown. These stone-like structures mark the spot where members usually gather to worship. Independence City, as the name suggests, came into existence after Jamaica became independent. The community is located in Portmore, St. Catherine. It's more than a housing scheme, boasting amenities usually found in central locations. History says a Liberty tree was planted here on Liberty Hill on August 1, 1838. The tree was given root to honor the freedom granted to enslaved people. The Liberty Hill Great House is also a part of the history of the community. Anthony Carr engages in a moment of nostalgia.
It was quite a productive farm. Yeah, there were many acres of bananas, citrus, cattle were reared, there were coconuts, pimento, and many other things.
This sign says it all. The district was named after Thomas Clarkson, an advocate for the abolition of slavery. Hubert Hall, pastor of the Clarksonville Baptist Church, along with his predecessors, tried their best to preserve at least one aspect of its heritage.
In fact, we have a deed of sale, an actual deed of sale for the property.
Today, Clarksonville is home to a number of persons who are trying their best to improve their livelihood.
My grandfather came here in 1870 when he bought a Delphi pen from an English woman by the name of Mrs. Smith and settled here.
Well, Adelphi was first known as Stretch and Set. It was the first place in St. Anne that allowed slaves to obtain religious knowledge. This man-made pond, according to Mr. Lowe, was used as a cooling tower for machines on the sugar plantation.
On August 1, 1838, the members of the Mount Zion Mission paraded to celebrate their freedom. They marched to the church. Men, women, and children were greeted by the church's minister, who read phrases from the banners they held high. Wages are better than whips. We will work for our wives and children. No bond but the law. Words that gave hope to our island's people and a need to fight to the end. As we go throughout this period, let's reflect on the struggles of our ancestors. Let's honor their fight for the freedom that is ours today. Let us work with one love and as one family to make our country the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business.
I was born here, and I was raised here. Resilient people, a tropical island. Oh yeah, and I learned to smile. Beautiful. Here I learned what love is. Authentic Jamaica, the happiest island. Oh yes. So let's remind ourselves and tell the world hello. Hello. I'm a Jamaican. We are Jamaicans.
And that's all we have for you today on our show. If you missed anything, you can watch it all again on our website or YouTube page. And don't forget to keep up with us on social media. On behalf of the entire production crew, I'm Sandra Clark. Take care.
This has been a production of the Jamaica Information Service, the voice of Jamaica.